This is Tar Heel Talk, an in-depth look at the issues and people making news in North Carolina. Here's your host, Sonia Williams.
Our science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM, workforce is crucial to our nation's innovative capacity and global competitiveness. Yet women are vastly underrepresented in STEM jobs and among STEM degree holders, despite making up nearly half of the U.S. workforce and half of the college-educated workforce. Well, today we'll take a closer look at women in STEM careers with two local experts who are making an impact in STEM both nationally and worldwide. Joining me now is Doretha Johnson, CEO of Advanced Transformational Technologies and Engineering Management Solutions, and Dr. Christine Grant, Professor and Associate Dean in the College of Engineering at NC State University. Thank you both so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I just said, women are vastly underrepresented when it comes to STEM careers. Talk a little bit about why that's the case.
Well, I would say that women often don't have the exposure to role models and people in their lives or people in media or other places where they know that there's an opportunity for them to be successful in the STEM field. And that is something that people have worked to change over a long period of time. However, we're still looking at not having the numbers that we need.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add that I think we have to deal with stereotypes and biases. Mm-hmm. Often we think if we're creative and kind of right-brained that we might not be as technically focused as other people sometimes.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about, now you both have had very long careers in STEM mm-hmm. fields. Talk a little bit about your personal background and how you came to pursue a career in a STEM area.
Okay. I'll start. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and when I was in high school, I was actually pretty good in math and science. And my father was a school teacher and insisted that I take the highest level of math and science that was offered, no matter what I thought I might want to major in college. And so, as I was growing up, I thought I actually wanted to be an attorney as I grew up. And but I had a chemistry teacher who noticed that I was pretty much the only girl in my calculus class and in our chemistry and physics classes at the time. Mm-hmm. And she introduced me to a program at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland. It was an early exposure program for engineering for minorities. And that's how I got started. And I ended up attending Case Western Reserve and majoring in polymer engineering and science. And that's how I got started.
So my story was similar. My mother actually was a biology teacher, and I grew up in a home where my father was a music teacher and my mother was a science teacher. And so I grew up as a little girl doing experiments, science experiments, in the kitchen, in the backyard, and different things like that with my mom, mm-hmm. who was a stay-at-home mom at the time, because that was kind of the norm. And then when I was in high school, I actually got exposed to a pre-engineering program, and I went to UMass Amherst, and then I went to Northeastern University in the summer for a program. It was a program for minority students in high school to learn more about engineering, and so that's how I got involved with engineering. Then I went on to Brown University, and then I went to graduate school at Georgia Tech, and it was that early exposure, though, I think, and knowing that it was okay for mm-hmm. women to have a career in the sciences. Absolutely. That I learned.
And you both have brought up a good point that you had that early exposure. Mm-hmm. With that in mind, do you feel like our schools are doing enough today to expose our girls early on to career fields in engineering?
Well, it's interesting because I don't remember the exact age, mm-hmm. but I know that there is an age at which young women start to not have the same level of interest in math and science, mm-hmm. and they start to go into other directions. And I don't know if it's about 8 years old or somewhere mm-hmm. in the teens. I can't remember the exact age, but the bottom line is that there is a drifting that happens, and there are not are not role models or people to kind of pull them back and say, no, if you had that interest when you were a young girl, you can still celebrate that interest and move in that area. So I think that drifting is something that happens naturally, perhaps, and unless you have people who are intentionally trying to make sure that they pursue that path, it won't happen.
Yes. Yeah, I think the schools can probably do more, but I think also parents and teachers and grandparents and aunts and uncles and role models within the child's family can also do a lot more to expose girls and boys, in some cases, to STEM and the value and the fun of being in a STEM-related career, the problem solving.
You both have worked on this book, Success Strategies from Women in STEM. Dr. Grant, you were the editor on this book, and then Doretha, you wrote a chapter in the book. Tell us a little bit about this, because it says it's a portable mentor, and you both have talked so much about the importance of having a mentor. How is this book going to help other women in STEM careers?
So the interesting thing is the way the book was originated is there was a woman, her name is Dr. Shirley Jackson, who is the president of RPI, and she actually recommended me as writing a chapter in the book, in the first edition. So I wrote a chapter on mentoring, and Peggy Pritchard, who's the co-editor on this book, she asked me for the second edition, would you like to write a chapter on mentoring again, revise your chapter, and also be a co-editor? And so I said, yeah, that'd be great. And so Doretha and I had a conversation about would she be interested in participating in this as well? And so that's how we came to work together on the book. But it is the second edition of the book, and it is a portable mentor because it's a compilation. It has chapters in it on mentoring and networking and leadership and climbing the ladder, and they're all written by women from different fields of STEM.
And Doretha, your chapter focuses on negotiating with emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Christine says we talked about it, but she actually volunteered me to work on this chapter. And so we're really good friends, and so she volunteered me for the chapter. So my interest in negotiating, first of all, I think I have a reputation as being a great negotiator. But the emotional intelligence part comes in from my master's and graduate level studies in positive organizational development, and learning and having an interest in not just the technical and hard problem solving skills associated with engineering, but also what people think of as soft problem solving skills. And so when I think about emotional intelligence and negotiation, I think they go hand in hand in terms of really focusing on achieving a win-win solution for both parties. And so it starts with, self-awareness and understanding what your motivations and intentions are in the negotiation process, being able to regulate yourself and having empathy for the other party, and then using that to collaborate and come together on with principle-based problem-solving approaches, so that it's a joint collaborative process and not just a one-sided process.
And this book, like you said, it has a variety of topics and information for women. What, I guess, is the biggest takeaway that you want people to get from the book?
I think that when I think about what Peggy Pritchard, her original vision for the book was to have a portable mentor, something that women and men actually can pick up and say, well, I need some information about leadership, and they open up the chapter on leadership. I think the other thing that is interesting about the book is that there is a thread that goes through the book, which is a series of stories that are vignettes that came from the authors and came from studies that Peggy Pritchard did with a group of students up in Canada, because that's where she's from. And the interesting thing is that you don't get bored, because it's not just a how-to. It is a how-to, and it is a how I did it as well. And so it is not it's not really preachy. It's experiential, and I think that that's what makes it relevant to women and men. And so I should mention, the first book was called Success Strategies for Women in Science. And we found out that men and women were reading the book, and we also found out that men were getting the book and giving it to women who were working with them. And so we changed the title to Success Strategies from Women in STEM. So it's not just the sciences, but it's science, technology, engineering, and math. And also it's from women. So the women in the book, so to speak, are the experts that can give this information to anybody. So a lot of the examples in the book have to do with women. However, there are also vignettes that are general that anybody can glean from. So that's how the book evolved into what it is, a portable mentor.
And Doretha, what would you say would be your biggest takeaway from this book?
I think the biggest takeaway from that book is that we all need people in our lives to help us problem solve at different levels. And so the mentoring, I think the emphasis on being a portable mentor, it's like Christine said, it's something that we can take with us. You can take it with you. But the real emphasis is on where would you turn to when you have a question that you don't want to go and take to your boss, for example, or a question that you're struggling with and your peers may be struggling with, and how do you go and where do you turn to find solutions to just common problems around navigating your way through your career path, whether you're in an academic setting, a corporate setting, or private business or entrepreneurial setting. And so I think it's really a great tool. It's also a great tool for teachers as well. It's also a great tool to look at examples of leadership, examples of negotiating, examples of emotional agility, and be able to draw from that. And so,
we're going to take a break. We'll talk more in just a minute. We'll be back with more on women in STEM after these messages. Today's show focuses on women in science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM careers. And my guests are two local experts who are making an impact in STEM both nationally and worldwide. With us again is Dr. Christine Grant, Professor and Associate Dean in the Department of Engineering at North Carolina State, and Jaretha Johnson, CEO of Advanced Transformational Technologies, Engineering and Management Solutions. Thank you both again for being with us. Now, you both have had long careers in STEM fields, but you come from two very different fields in the STEM area. Talk a little bit about your work history and how that all tied together in your book project.
So the interesting thing is that we have similar backgrounds. I'm a chemical engineering major, was a chemical engineering major by training, and Jaretha is polymer engineer, which is they're very similar fields. Right. And so that's one thing that we have in common. I think, though, that as we were going through this process, we actually learned from each other. So the areas that we worked in, she was in industry for a while, and I'll let her talk about that. I've been in academia as a faculty member and associate dean for almost 30 years. And so my world is different than her world, but we learned so much from each other. And I think I learned a lot as a co-editor of the book, because I had to read all the chapters of the other women. I didn't read all the chapters when I was just okay, shouldn't say that. But the bottom line is that I really had to delve into the meat of it and make sure that it all tied together. I learned so much about the differences that women have experienced in the STEM field, whether they're in academia or in industry. And so we were able to pull that together, and we learned a lot from each other.
Yeah, so my background is corporate. I worked for 25 years with Procter & Gamble. And I started in Cincinnati, and I think probably one of my very first negotiations in my whole career was negotiating to work in manufacturing versus working in research and development. And early on in my career, I actually had an industry experience with another company while I was in college. And so at first they placed me in a lab, and I'm a real strong people person. And I was really pretty bored in the research lab. And so I couldn't have been an academic. I couldn't have been the person to work in the lab. And for whatever reason, the recruiter had enough insight to say, well, let me put her in a manufacturing environment. And my first manufacturing job was making Eveready batteries in Fremont, Ohio. And I walked into this dirty, chaotic place that was producing millions of batteries, annually, and just pushing cases out the door. And I just fell in love with that environment.
Oh my goodness.
And so from there, when I started working with Procter & Gamble, I may have been one of the few women who was actually requesting that I work in manufacturing. And with Procter & Gamble, I have manufactured so many products that I'm sure are in everyone's home. Products from Sure and Secret deodorant to Tide and Cheer and Pampers and Always and even pet care products, Iams and Eukanuba branded products. And so I consider myself a manufacturing brand manager. And I moved here to North Carolina from Mexico City. I was a plant manager down in Mexico, and I moved here to North Carolina to manage a plant that we have here. And so very long career in manufacturing.
Absolutely. And we were talking about the fact that women are so underrepresented in STEM careers. I can imagine in manufacturing that is the case as well. What were some of the challenges that you faced being not only a woman in the manufacturing field, but also a manager and a leader in that field?
Yes, and so when I first started with Procter & Gamble, I was assigned as a team manager. So really, I was a team manager, but really a supervisor of a team of people that were much older than I was and much more experienced than I was. And so I think the first hurdle was just having this young woman who was going to be their manager. And how would you relate to someone who's young enough to be your daughter, but yet they're making decisions that can impact your life? And I would say that I was really fortunate. When we talk about mentoring comes at all levels in the organization. And I was fortunate enough to have people that I was intended to supervise, but who were actually mentoring me and training me to become a better manager. And so I would say challenges I faced have been probably centering around perhaps questioning my capability to lead. So sometimes having to prove that I can make tough decisions, or that I can really make the impact on the business that I like to make. But for the most part, I think I was relatively lucky. I had a group of women who came into the corporation before I did. They were really the trailblazers, and so they kind of smoothed the way a little bit. So I think that was really helpful, and they were mentors for me.
So there's an interesting theme that I'd like to pick up on, and it's being the only one. When I joined the faculty at NC State in chemical engineering, we had a faculty probably of maybe a couple hundred faculty in the whole College of Engineering, and I was the only African-American woman, and I was the only African-American woman in that role for 16 years. And so being the only lonely and trying to find somebody to mentor you required me to go outside my department, to be mentored by someone who was on the other side of the campus, who looked like me. It was African-American male who every semester he would take me out to lunch, and he would look at my portfolio, my resume, and say, Christine, you're doing this right, do more of this, do less of this. And then I had mentors that were around the country that looked like me and didn't look like me. So I had white male mentors that were there. So this whole idea of cross-cultural mentoring for me was really important. But the biggest challenge was being taken seriously, I think, and being taken seriously in the classroom, and having students who didn't look like me have a faculty member who didn't look like them to be the authority and the person who's giving them their grades. I think that was a challenge for some. And then the last thing is being invisible, or feeling like I'm invisible. Going to conferences and you walk in the room and people look right by you. It still happens to me now as an associate dean. I can walk into a major center review with millions of dollars where I had something to do with something behind the scenes that people don't know about. However, when I walk in the room, people look right by me and don't think that I have a place there, or certainly she can't be an associate dean because, then they don't know me. So I think I still struggle with that. It's still something that, when I say struggle, not that it's a struggle for me, but it's still an issue that presents itself in my career in terms of, do you belong here, and who are you, and prove yourself. And I think early on I probably spent a lot more time trying to prove myself. And now I just, it is what it is, and I'm here, and yeah.
Definitely having that support system is important. We're going to take another break, and we'll finish up in just a minute.
Okay.
Don't go away. Tar Heel Talk will continue after these messages. Welcome back to Tar Heel Talk. I'm Sonia Williams. We're talking today with the author and editor of Success Strategies from Women in STEM. That's Dr. Christine Grant, who is in the College of Engineering at NC State University, and also Doretha Johnson, who is the CEO of her own company as well. And we thank you both for being with us. You have worked on this book together, Christine as an editor, and Doretha, you wrote a chapter in the book. You're talking about advice for women, or from women in STEM careers, but this book is for everyone.
Yes. And so one of the things that I talk about in my chapter on negotiating is negotiating our roles as wives and mothers and managers and instructors and professors, and just how do you negotiate the whole work-life integration. And one of the biggest insights I had as I was looking at that is that that's probably what you're negotiating there, is you're negotiating that you're actually a whole person. Mm-hmm. And so at work, you know, you want the people at work just want to look at you in one box, and the people at home look at you in another box. And what you're really negotiating in terms of balancing that is that I am a full-time wife, I'm a full-time mother, and I'm a full-time manager. And so you want the people at work to accept that, the role that you have at home, as well, and the people at home to accept the roles you have at work. And so really that's one of the biggest negotiations and navigations, is how do you negotiate the acceptance of the whole person and the complete person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that that's really, that's another thing actually that Jaretha and I have in common, and that's not to say that that's the only way your life can be structured, but we're both married to engineers, we both have children, and negotiating that whole thing, and we have parents that we have to take care of, and all those things that women have to do. And they have said in the past that you can have it all. Well, you can have it all, but not necessarily all at the same time. And so integrating those things is really important, and negotiating and navigating that, and having friends who are going through the same thing at the same time is really critical. So finding that support network, there's a chapter on networking in there as well, not just professional networking, but personal networking, to make sure that you're a whole person and that you can negotiate, navigate, whatever you have to do in order to get through this life. And recognizing that there are different seasons in your life. And early on, if you're single and you're in the STEM field, that maybe you can work late and you can do things, you know, but as you get older and you have other responsibilities that come into play, then you have to change some of the things that you do. And I think recognizing that your life and the things that you have to do and your responsibilities are ebbing and flowing as you go is something really important that we think women don't always talk about. They focus mainly on their careers, and this book will help you to find that balance, I believe.
And even for young women, negotiating the fact that even though you're single,
yes,
you still want to take time away from work and time for yourself.
This is true.
Excellent point. How can people find out more information about the work that you're doing individually?
So for myself, I am at drchristinegrant.com. I am actually a motivational speaker. I do seminars and workshops, and go to different universities and do keynotes and things like that. So that's my website, and that's the main way to find me outside the university.
Okay.
Yes, and my website is advancedtransformations.org. I focus on engineering and management solutions, so I work a lot with corporate leaders and teams. I do a lot of problem solving with small manufacturers on all types of technology and organizational development and work-related and strategic focus areas, strategic operations.
We have about 2 minutes left in the program, and you both have talked a lot about the importance of having a mentor and how instrumental that has been in your success in your various careers. What advice would you give to a young woman or a girl who may be interested in pursuing a career in the STEM field?
I think it's really important to identify someone that you want to be like, so to speak. If there is someone that is an exemplar, someone that you see, study them, look them up on the web, perhaps reach out to them, send them an email to say, I'm interested in what you do. I've done that a lot to find the people who have been my mentors, and people reach out to me to be a mentor to them. And it may not be a long-term relationship, it may be short-term, just some advice that you give or get, and then identify people locally that can help you. It might be someone at your church, someone at your school, someone in the community. And just with the internet, it's so much easier than it was when we were in school to find people to assist you with what you'd like to do.
And I would just add exposure to math and science, and the earlier you get that exposure, so take the math and science classes, even if you think you don't like them, because it teaches you a particular language. And the earlier you get exposure to that language, the more comfortable you're going to be having those conversations.
Excellent advice. Jaretha Johnson, Christine Grant, thank you both so much for sharing your wealth of knowledge and for being our guest today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That's it for this week's Tar Heel Talk. To comment on this or other episodes of the show, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or send an email to tarheeltalk@fox50.com. I'm Sonia Williams. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again next week.